Good morning and welcome to this, the fourth and final in the series of our webinars on resilience. And the title of today's webinar is Demonstrating that you are resilient. And for those of you who've missed the previous ones, this is what you missed. We had one on incident response planning, on third parties, process mapping. These are aspects and activities you need to be engaged in if you are going to be truly resilient. These are available to you if you've registered. Obviously you have, and if you haven't got them, email us, go back to the address where you registered. You possibly have the link. Anyway, okay. I was searching for, as I always do, a quote that was appropriate to the subject matter, and I found a few, but I like this one because of the sentiment, but also the man who said it, Nelson Mandela. Do not judge me by my success, judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. And I thought how good that is a description of our resilience. You know, we keep getting back up. And I've had in the last week a personal experience of an organization that had an incident that I would say didn't demonstrate resilience, but more about that later. Okay, today again, after a quick introduction, I know most of you are returning and know us, but we continue to see some new people. So a quick slide on who we are, and then covering these four aspects: the abilities and capabilities you need to have and to be resilient. Good. But to talk about a maturity model, I'm only going to talk about it in general terms because it is a concept that I came across many years ago, coming from the software and tech side. You don't become resilient overnight. It's not a digital thing. It's not going from non-resilient to resilient. It's something you gradually become, as it were. And key to, I suppose, getting that level of resilience is testing or exercising your response plans and checking that they're working. Don't wait for a real life incident. Learn from real life incidents as well. But you can use the exercises to advance and improve your plans. And can you demonstrate, and do you know that you can stay within your impact tolerances? Okay, so through these four kind of points, I'm hoping to cover what you need to do to be able to demonstrate to, your management, to the board, to the regulators, to your customers, whoever's interested. Can you demonstrate? Can you show that you are resilient? Okay. Firstly, to us, we're a company who produce a governance, risk and compliance solution, but we see ourselves as, like many of you, risk and compliance professionals, and we're members of various institutions to keep our skills sharp, so that we can talk to you about your challenges and solutions when we do talk to you. We offer a risk advisory service, whereby you can use our expertise. This is headed up by Sandy O'Leary, who has many years' experience working in as a risk management officer, so knows exactly what you guys are going through. And our software is used by over 3,000 users in various regulated and non-regulated firms, but chiefly in the financial services sector and the not-for-profit sector. So that's us. Again, quick brief, if you like, summary of what's in resilience. And I often refer back to the Basel description of what resilience is about. It's the ability to deliver critical operations through disruption. Now, you're not delivering everything, but the critical stuff, nobody sees that you've had a disruption because it was seamless and you continue to deliver it. Resilience isn't one thing, it's many things. And I use these 5 categories. generally agreement with regulators and with others. Risk management, information security, incident management, business continuity, and disaster recovery. And it may be one person in your organization if you're a smaller organization, or it could be 10 people if you're a large organization. But these functions need to come together. And the next slide shows you, probably in a diagram based on time, when these activities come into play. So long before an incident happens, you are certainly managing the risks, hoping to prevent those incidents in the first place and detecting them when they do happen. Information security has got so complex in the last 20 years that it is a discipline in its own, and indeed difficult for, impossible for one person to have all of the skills necessary, even in information security. So we've covered this before, but just to remind you, I would like to show you now in my mind map, and those who've seen my presentations in the past know I love mind maps. But I thought about this and thought, well, what are the activities? If those are the 5 areas, what are the activities you're engaged in if your objective is to make the organization more resilient? Now, I've added another 2. Those observant among you will have noticed that I've added governance and third parties. And I've done that because sounds from the regulator as well about their unhappiness with how you and I are managing our third parties. And in terms of resilience, if you don't see the third parties as an extension of your organization, then you're missing a big chunk. Governance, I think, is something that underpins all of your plans. If you don't have the governance, if you don't have the policies, the procedures, the responsibilities assigned, the reporting, then really it's ad hoc, and you're not even on the scale of maturity, to my mind. You're not serious about it. So so many things fail because of poor governance. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these here, but if I pick out a few and say, well, what would the regulator, and this is my opinion, I am not basing it on any statement by a regulator, but this is my opinion as to what the regulator would be looking for. If I was a supervisor coming to look at what have you done under governance, one of the things I'd pick out is, well, show me your standing agenda at your management team meeting or the board meetings, and is it on your standing agenda? Certainly risk management is a big part of being resilient, and you're not looking for a parallel activity. You're looking to see it integrated into the risk management framework. And have you identified all the risks that could bring a disruption to your business, and have you got plans in place to prevent them and then to mitigate if things do happen? Certainly looking at third parties, and we did spend a whole session on third parties, but the register of information, who's critical, right? Because not all your third parties are critical, but who are the critical ones? And have you done an assessment? Have you done due diligence? Do you continue to do the due diligence? So lots of things you can do there to prove or to demonstrate you are in control and are managing this. In information security, again, we did a whole session on that, but it's identifying your assets, protecting them, detecting if you've got an attack or a breakdown some way, and having the plans in to respond to that and to recover from it. And then under incident management, again, we did a whole session on that, but have a plan at least. Now, the plan won't be perfect and you won't predict the exact nature of the next incident, but if you have a plan that you can adapt, then you're 3/4 of the way there. For many, for many years, many of you will have business continuity plans, and that was kind of the where it was at in terms of resilience. You accepted a disruption and you got to a continuity state, limping along until you could do a full recovery. Those plans are still important as part of resilience. The resilience, if you like, is focused on the critical services, but business continuity capabilities are fundamental to the responding if you do have an incident. And again, it's not new, but exercising or testing, I prefer exercising plans is key, because if you haven't tested your plans, then you're going to be surprised when you have an incident. And it's a service we've recently added, which is facilitating desktop exercises. We've been doing it for years, but now we've formally put it on our website. But do exercise your plans, and we'll talk about that later in this presentation. Key, I think, from a prioritization point of view, under business continuity plans, is understanding which of the business services and which of the processes and activities are the most important. You need a prioritized list, because when you do have an incident, you don't have that time to figure out, well, which should we do first now? When an incident happens, you might change that order, but you need to start from not a blank sheet of paper, but from something that you've considered and thought about. Okay, you'll be getting a copy of the slides, so there's a bit more information in here, but these are the activities, and you should be asking yourself, are we doing this? If somebody asks, could I show that, yes, we're doing that? Okay, I thought as a help, I would summarize at least 8 of those points, those 8 little red boxes in words. So the same thing, the resilience is on the agenda, you've identified the critical services, you've aligned your risk management with your resilience goals, you've assessed your information security risk, you've developed an incident response plan, you've developed business continuity plan, you've tested your plans, and you're managing, not that you manage the third parties, but you're managing that relationship and all of the facets of the relationship with the third parties. Okay. I did a bit of research on, I suppose my topic was, how do you assess organizational resilience? Now, you could dig out the new standard from BSI on 65,000 on organizational resilience. But I actually found an article from the University of Rome, and it was an analytic framework to assess organizational resilience. And the bit I found interesting in it was they identified 4 abilities that you need to acquire if you're going to be resilient. And what I found interesting is that I could map these to the headings that the central bank regulator in Ireland uses, the identify and prepare, respond and adapt, recover and learn. The anticipating as an ability, if you think about it, if you make a strategic decision, that brings with it opportunities, yes, and threats, and you need to be anticipating those, and you need to figure out what now does that strategic decision mean for us. If there are new regulations coming in, and you generally will get up to 2 years advance notice, you've got to anticipate the impact of those new regulations, right? The monitoring is, I think, an extension of the anticipating. I think if anticipating is somewhat passive, waiting and reacting, monitoring is more looking ahead, try not to be surprised. Key risk indicators, monitoring stuff, and if it's changing, being aware of those changes in a timely manner so that you're not surprised. More about that later. The responding, and I said just earlier that it's not just about having a plan, but about having that agility to adapt the plan and tailor it to the specific scenario. It's about decision making, and believe me, I've seen it, this paralysis through analysis. You've got an incident, you need to decide quickly. You can't be waiting another half an hour for more information. You might make a slightly better decision. It's better you make a decision now. So that sharp end decision making is an ability, and one that you can get better at. And remember, you don't and you won't have a plan to cover every scenario. So you got to think on your feet. Again, it's an ability. And the learning, and learning is an ability. But you have to be open to it. You have to some of you will know some of the books I read because I mention them. Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. And I could use really the subtitle of learning from your mistakes, but learning from exercises, learning from your experience as well. Be open to that. Be willing to say that, oh, I thought that, but I was wrong. And this is what it is. You know, if you have that open mind and willing to learn, trust me, you will get better. And those who are blind or don't want to see or don't want to be proven wrong, that's only going one way. So I encourage you to be open to learning. Now, I thought I would anticipate the question that might come in is, and we have a question. Okay, Mary liked the encompassing slide from earlier. It's one thing to have an ability, but you need the capability as well. So for myself, I had to try and distinguish the difference between ability and capability. And if ability is the skill that you might have, capability requires capacity as well. You need the time to apply it, and you need maybe the resources, the materials. So if ability is what the people have, the humans, capability is what the organization has. Okay, so bear that in mind. Okay. Now, this is a slide I've used in many presentations over the years, and I usually have on it a credit to Ariana Chappelle, who came up with the headings, the exposure indicators. The rest is my words. But when you're thinking of key risk indicators, some that it will, think of the monitoring, think of, you don't want to be surprised, and you want to know before you're surprised if things are changing, if things are heading south, as it were. It's not 20 indicators. You don't need 20, but you probably need a half a dozen to tell you what's happening in the business. And the first one is the business environment, usually outside of your control, but you still need to be aware of what's happening, whether it's the unemployment rate or whether it's the investment interest rates, or whether it's outstanding debt. You know, that maybe your customers are experiencing tough times and they're taking longer to pay. Be aware of you'll know your own, key ratios and metrics that will tell you what's happening in the market, as it were. Stress indicators, though, are more about how stressed are your people or your systems. If sick days has gone up. I mean, I used to manage a call center, and I knew I could correlate sick days with how busy we were, usually slightly delayed when we were clearly in need of additional people. If people are leaving, that's telling you something. If you have accidents, system downtime, I'm a hardware engineer as well. I used to be, and I can tell you hardware dies. And if you're monitoring systems and you see that it's 100% for many months, and then it's 99%, and then you have small breakdowns, it might be that the age of the system is now telling and things are beginning to fail. Again, you'll get indicators. We'll always get big surprises, but a lot of these things can be foreseen by monitoring certain items. Causal indicators. These are the things that you could see now, and they're going to cause you problems maybe 3 months, 6 months down the road. And if you have a lot of open positions and are difficulty filling them with people, well, guess what? Your existing people are going to be stressed very soon because they're having to cope and do 2 jobs because you don't have that additional person. So monitor a few of those as well. Probably the one most of us monitor is the failure indicators, but it's only one aspect, and this is why I list them out here. Whether you're counting new customers added or customers who have cancelled or left your business, moved to somebody else, complaints, data breaches. This list is, none of these lists are exhaustive. Pick them for your business. Now, somebody needs to be responsible for gathering this information. And how often? Do you measure complaints on a monthly basis, for example? It's probably good enough. Some things you might measure quarterly. So you need to decide that, and who's going to measure it, and who's going to look at the big picture. Because if you have 4 people each measuring 2 indicators, you've got 8 indicators. Who gets to see the 8 and make that judgment? Okay, so don't just measure them for measurement's sake. I think reviewing them and understanding them is a key part of that. Again, that ability to read the stats. Okay. How are we doing on time? Okay, we're okay. Again, I think key part of being able to demonstrate, whether it's to the board or to the management, or if the regulator come in and said, well, show me how you're communicating what you're doing in terms of the activities back to the management and to the board. Reporting. Now, I've listed a few and I've shown a few here. Could you show me a list of all your critical or important business services? Hopefully none of you fail that one. Scenario exercises. When was the last time you did an exercise, whether it was a desktop or whether it was a component exercise or partial? Show me. Can you show me any evidence of where you've learned from an incident, learned from an exercise, and changed something? And the graphics here are a list of risks associated with third parties to demonstrate, yes, we are measuring it, managing it. The monitoring, whatever the metrics are that you're monitoring, and you got answers to questions. Incidents, are you recording incidents? And again, you will have seen in a previous session, we talked about incidents, or I do, as intelligence gathering. Each incident is an opportunity to learn something and change something. And then controls, are your controls working? Because if you have ineffective controls or only partially effective, you got to address them, because by definition, they can't be left like that. Okay, so you should be gathering the evidence. Now, maturity model. This may be new for some of you. I've used it in the past. It goes back to the 70s, I think. Carnegie Mellon University in the States, and it was originally for software developers. The idea being a tool by which you would, well, I see it, I've written it down here. You can assess your current effectiveness and figuring out what capabilities you need to acquire next to improve your performance. But over the years, this has grown in all disciplines, whether it's energy management, risk management, health and safety management, the concept of maturity model. And the CMMI, and I've just blocked off the bottom two because they're a distraction, but their language is somewhat, I'm going to say academic, defined, quantitatively managed, optimizing. I found the words for 3, 4, and 5 here in recent literature, and I liked the sound of that. So if I take ad hoc, it's just sporadic throughout the organization. Initial, somebody makes a start and tries to introduce some formal approach, whereas 3's foundation is when maybe the organization has decided let's do this in a formal way. But building on that would take what you've, a good start, I would say. 3 is a good start, and extending it across the organization in all functions. We often see, if you take risk management, it might start in one department, and when they've got it sorted and have the policies and the procedures and the methodology, it's spread across the organization. That's level 4, when you can say, now we're doing it enterprise-wide. You will come across the phrase enterprise risk management. I prefer to call it enterprise-wide risk management. It's not a different type of risk management from just risk management. It's just across the organization. And then when you're good and you're doing everything you think you should be, don't stop there, because the sustaining level 5 is where you get to always wanting to improve. You take the Irish rugby team, 15 points out of 15. And what will they be saying after last Saturday's match? Well, we could improve the line out, and, we could improve our handling. They'll always be looking for areas to improve. And that's what the best organizations and the best teams do. Okay. Now, to shock you, because there is a lot of work in this, and each of those boxes have 6 things. I've only put it in the top row, and I've shown it in bigger font on the right-hand side. But if you take a maturity model, generally they will look across people, process, and technology, the traditional ones. Now, I added third parties because I think that requires a focus as well on its own. And then within each of these areas, you need to look at the governance of the people, the governance, the risk management around people, the information security, incident management, business continuity, disaster recovery, for each of those verticals. So each row is 24 things that you need to be doing something about and improving it. So look, it's not something, resilience isn't something you get in 3 months or 6 months. I think it's a journey of maybe 18 months. And I say that to boards whenever we do training as well. Don't expect this. You're not going to become a brilliant piano player, in 3 months. Well, one of you might, but not mere mortals. Okay, and so on to exercising plans, and some of them are tests, but tests tends to imply pass or fail, but I prefer to see these as exercises, and some things work and some things don't. In my research, I would classify plan exercising into 3 types. One, component testing. You're testing a restore from a backup. That's an individual component of a bigger plan. A tabletop exercise is then taking a scenario and stepping through it for a particular scenario, maybe loss of power to the building. How would you respond? But it's not pulling any plugs. It's sitting around a table and discussing a plausible, significant scenario and how you'd respond. And the live exercises, and I'm not going into that today because I'm not advocating it at all. It's one you will have seen police, a fire brigade, ambulance service maybe having a coordinated response to, let's say, a major incident, let's say a major accident on a motorway with multiple vehicles involved. And they actually do it out on the road. I know of one customer who did pull the plug on a system to see if their response plan would work, and that little exercise became a crisis on its own. So be very wary. It can be very costly. So let's look at a little bit more detail in the other 2. Component testing, and I would advocate doing as many of these as possible before you even do the desktop walkthrough, because the desktop walkthrough might expose stuff that should have been found out earlier, and indeed the desktop walkthrough may not. It might assume that this restore of data from the backup went smoothly. By the way, more than 50% of those fail. Yeah, shocking, isn't it? So a component test, by definition, it's maybe an individual testing a component of their plan. It might be, a restore procedure for IT, restoring from a backup, for example. It might be the call tree that you've said if you need to contact people, then A rings B, C, and D, and B, C, and D ring D, E, and F, and so on, and that call tree matrix. So no one person has to make more than 3 calls to get the message out. It may be you're testing a different communications infrastructure, that your phone system has gone down, and now you've got to go to maybe it's voice over IP calls, internet calling, or it could be that you're diverting the calls to another building and you've got to test that diversion. All of these are individual elements of a plan, and they should be tested on their own. Now, it generally is cost effective, it's minimal risk. You probably do it at a time where it doesn't affect the normal operations. And the objective, of course, is to identify that, well, it works. Is there any missing information? Have we got the wrong numbers, the telephone numbers? When you did the restore and the backup, and you're probably wondering, why does 50% fail? Well, most of the time, the reason it fails is the backup wasn't done in the first place. that there was an error and nobody spotted it. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, these can be done kind of under the radar by the individual who owns them, and so that when it comes to the bigger plan, they're confident their components work. So now to the tabletop, and I find this the most interesting. I've done a lot of these with customers, and it's a round table format, boardroom table. We've done them with up to 23 people. Generally, it's with the senior management and then key people from the individual teams. The teams might be senior leadership team, call it a goal team if you wish. Then it might be the operations team. It might be the IT team, maybe facilities, communications. There's no set grouping. It depends on your organization and the size. But key in a desktop exercise is a credible scenario. If you introduce a scenario that is unbelievable, then you will not get engagement from the people. So it has to be credible, and the people can say, I can see this happening, right? And they need to engage. That is, the facilitator presents a scenario, and if I take the first one here, cyber attack, it's 11:30 on a Friday night, somebody's working late, clicks on a link, and they've just unleashed a ransomware attack. What are you going to do? And you present that to the room. If you're that person, what are you going to do? And if you're the person who gets notified of that, what are you going to do? And then you talk about that, the initial stage of that. It's now 2 hours later. This is the scenario. This is what we know. What are you going to do? And so on. You unfold, the facilitator unfolds the scenario. Maybe it's 2 hours by 2 hours. I did one with the pandemic, believe it or not, in January 2020, before we even knew. And it was the injects were one week apart. All of this is conducted in about a 2-hour session. And the objectives generally are that people around the table become familiar with the plans, because they've been told about the plans, but they've never really engaged. So now they have to engage. But they become familiar with their role in the plans and with the working with other teams. And it has to work as a role play, and they have to say what they're going to do. But the objective also is to ensure that we haven't forgotten anything. And any exercise that doesn't identify, I'm going to say, a minimum of 6 things that you want now to put in the plan would be a weak exercise. Generally, what I've seen is anything from 10 to 20. I think the record was 23 things. And that's good. It means you've got 23 things now in your plan that you didn't have before, and you're not waiting for a real life cyber attack to find out when it's too late. Generally, the scenarios can be around like a cyber attack. It could be the building loss. It could be people loss, when we've all got experience now of maybe loss of people, or it could be a power failure. You can pick key scenarios and play them out. And the idea is that you won't necessarily think of the next disaster. Would you have thought of a tornado in Leitrim? Would you have thought of extremely high water in Middleton? Now, some people probably have been warning about it for years. There will always be those who have anticipated it. But your plan may not have identified the exact scenario, but if you've got 5 or 6 key areas, your plan would generally be good. Now, this one is, again, minimal disruption to business, no live systems affected, and it's a reasonable cost. Okay. So hopefully I've convinced you to exercise your plans, whether it's just at the component level, but do a desktop exercise as well. And incidentally, if you're a regulated organization, and most of you are, the regulator will ask you, have you exercised your plans? And they will look for evidence of that. And if you haven't, they will tell you to. And they will ask you if you've restored a backup, by the way. And if you haven't restored a backup, as a test, they will tell you to do that as well. So don't wait. Okay. But don't let the plans gather dust. Update them after exercises, after disruptive events, because you will learn, of course. After an audit, somebody's gone and will look and check, and it's another pair of independent eyes, and they will probably find things that are missing in the plans. But you need to update lists. You know, people's telephone numbers change, suppliers change. It's amazing how quickly it goes out of date. And if you wanted a figure, my experience, 20% per year. So if you're not updating your lists every year at least, you know, within 3 years, 60% is out of date. Of course, you want to keep a copy of your plans off-site in some place that you can get in case you're building and your systems are not accessible. And the real pain is when you've got old plans in circulation. So do put a version number on them and a date preferably, and try and take the old ones. Do take the old ones out of circulation. Okay. Staying within your impact tolerance levels. When I thought about this and said, well, I mean, that's the objective. And you don't sometimes know until you have an incident. So you should be asking yourself the question, you know, were we able to stay with the impact tolerance levels? You know, did we recover within the 2 hours like we said we wanted to? And if you didn't, is the 2 hours too difficult? You know, is it too high a bar to try and achieve? And maybe when you talk to your customers and they say they were getting concerned when you weren't back, maybe the 2 hours is not high, but you need to do something to improve your response. You know, is your decision making fast and efficient? When you look back at an incident or an exercise, were people too slow in making that decision? And you will find that. And you know, change things such that you can make fast decisions. And often that's a trigger matrix that you decide beforehand, if this and this and this, these conditions exist, we're going to do this. And you do that without the emotion of the incident. You decide these trigger matrices or decision matrices beforehand so that you can make quick decisions. There are different techniques. I'm not the expert to ask, but go and look it up. Where people often fail is communications during an incident, you know, and keeping customers informed. So of when you will recover. Now I'm going to tell you about an incident I was involved in last week. I was on a train, 2-hour journey, 7 hours I was on that train. Well, on that and 2 other trains, because we were detrained and we were detrained again. And what struck me was the first communication said, we have an engine failure, but we're going to call Dublin, and we're only about 45 minutes outside Dublin, and we're going to get a new engine or a replacement engine to bring us on our journey. And 10 minutes later, we were told that there was no driver available to drive that spare engine. Now, can you imagine the groans that went out from the customers? You know, surely, you know, engines breaking down is a thing that happens. And part of your response plan is to be able to find a driver to drive the replacement engine, which you have for these scenarios. Anyway, I won't go on, but you know, you should be judging yourself by how you handle even the small incidents. And you know, will I decide again whether I drive or take the train? Yeah, I will be thinking about that. Okay, coming to the end, and we just have 2 or 3 slides and time for questions. I started off by saying this is about demonstrating you're resilient, and we could, you know, think we have to demonstrate this to the regulator, but you know, your customers want to know as well. And certainly, I was disappointed last week with the lack of resilience. I was impressed with the communication. We got communication every 10 minutes. It was good. A lot of things they did well, but the kind of the basic things, no. So, but do your customers know that you have good reserves? You know, if you're a bank or a credit union, and you know, people fear Northern Rock running the bank, you know, do you have good reserves? Are you resilient from that point of view? Do you have response plans that work? Have they seen them in action when you've had a small incident? You know, how you handle the small incidents is often an indicator of how you're going to handle the big ones. Do your customers know you have service providers that are reliable? Again, if you're relying on a service provider to provide, let's say, debit cards, credit cards, is there a consistent level of service there? If you say we will deliver that within 5 working days, does it happen? You know, are you measuring those metrics, those performance metrics? Are your systems reliable? Do you measure the uptime? And from the customer's perspective, when they want service from you, are you having to say, sorry, the system is down? You know, how often is that happening? Because that certainly won't instill confidence in the customers. And your people, are your people knowledgeable? Can they answer the queries and questions from your customers? You know, that's in a nutshell, really, it's your reputation, isn't it? That you can get a reputation. It takes you a long time to get a reputation, but you can lose it in half an hour. But finally, again, if the objective today was to give you some food for thought on how do you demonstrate that you are resilient, I think it's about evidence, isn't it? And do you have the evidence that shows you have a program, a resilience program in place? You know, if I was the regulator, could you show me, you know, a policy, maybe some procedures, tell me who's responsible, that you have a plan, that you're reporting on it, you know, some evidence of a program there, and not just an aspiration. Okay, so where do you fit between aspiration and a program? Fundamental things like, have you identified critical and important services? Have you identified your risks and mitigated them? Have you tested your plans? And can you provide evidence to show you are managing your third parties, or at least managing that relationship? So that's it, folks. We have 15 minutes. I'm going to do a blatant advert for a demo. We're doing in 8 days, Wednesday next week, just a half an hour. We think we have a good operational resilience solution. So I'll be giving a demo of that. It just takes about half an hour, and that's next Wednesday. You can register for that on our website under events. And now happy to take questions if you have questions. We'll have a look. Okay. Surely somebody has a question. Have I anticipated everything? I'm not that good. We do have time, but I'll give it back if nobody has questions. I think if I was to answer, okay, there's a couple coming in. DORA. Do you plan to roll out DORA training too? Alice. Short answer is yes. DORA is kind of, if resilience has been the buzzword for the last 2 years, I think DORA is beginning to, and the R in DORA is resilience, of course, but it's Digital Operational Resilience Act. And yes, expect to see more from us in the coming months. We're even looking at the product again, I think under the incident module, and under DORA there is requirement for deeper dive and investigation under incidents. So more on that. Anonymous, how do you get ownership of resilience? How do you get ownership? If you want ownership of it, then CEOs love it when people put their hand up and say, you know, I have an idea and I'm going to, here's my proposal, you know. If you want to get ownership of it, then I would say prepare an outline plan. Convince the senior management team and maybe the board, this is something that the organization should aspire to because it's good for your reputation. Start doing and you will get ownership of it. Raymond, your comment about having this on the standing agenda for the management team meeting was excellent. The more contact the team has with any subject, the better they will get at it. Thank you for that comment, Raymond. Yeah, there's nothing like having something on a standing agenda item. Now, you might say, well, if people just tick that box and only spend 30 seconds on it, then that's unfortunate. But if it's a standing agenda item, and if you're the responsible person for it, and you know it's only going to be given 5 minutes discussion, then don't deliver a 20-page heavy text document. Deliver something that's a 1-page with graphics and summaries. Having it on the agenda item is 50% of the battle, folks. Mark, how will DORA impact the UK as it's an EU regulation? Good question, Mark. DORA is the Digital Operation Resilience Act, and because it's an act, every organisation within, there is a scope document, and it's the bigger organisations. If you're a credit union, it's not affecting you yet. I'm saying yet. I think it will ultimately. It'll be the larger organisations. Now, if you're in the UK, why would you not comply with DORA? You comply with DORA because it's a good thing to do, I would say. So will it impact the UK? Maybe the UK are planning their own version of DORA, but it is something that goes beyond borders, and it's across the world, that because of and it's continually growing, the cyber attacks, the level and the sophistication of cyber attacks, that we have to get more resilient on our IT systems. So DORA is just one framework. Well, it's an act, and it's fairly comprehensive. So I think the progressive organisations in the UK will be saying we want to align ourselves with it purely because it's a good thing to do, and we're dealing internationally. So if you're able to say we comply with the guidelines in DORA or with the acts, it's a reputation thing, I think. So yeah, I think it's one of those acts that nobody's going to argue with, because it's good for everybody. We have set up a separate resilience committee that feeds into the ERC monthly. That's good. That's if you're a large enough organisation, Jason, you don't say, and I don't know your organisation. That's great. It's great having that focus. I'm hoping that my mind map at the beginning will certainly give you food for thought on that, because resilience, often people can focus on, like DORA is very much a focus on the digital side. There is a bit on the on incidents as well, and reporting critical incidents. But it's great if you've got basically a subcommittee that is focused on that. Like all of these initiatives, unless you have people made responsible, and who know they're responsible and have to report, monthly or quarterly on it, it just won't advance. Okay. Mary, will the slides be distributed? They will. What we'll do is we'll have a recording as well, and you'll get the slides and a link to the recording if you want to go back, or if you want a colleague maybe to listen in. Yeah, and if you've registered late, you will have access to the earlier ones as well, if you just reply to that email. Okay. You're welcome. I'm just checking for any other questions, folks. Okay, still quite a few on board. I was going to say if a question hadn't come up, and I just said, I know on the evidence, as I was writing this, I was thinking, who do you need to demonstrate you're resilient to? You could say, well, the only people who are important are the customers. But you don't really want to wait for an incident to find out that. So I think the best person to think of that you have to demonstrate it to is the non-executive director, right? Somebody who's on your side. And I think even the regulator is on your side. They want to find you doing it right rather than not doing something. And that's why I think being able to demonstrate the activities, the things you're doing, and, we're not perfect at this yet, but we're learning and we're getting there, and we're increasing our ability and our skills, and have that concept of this is an 18-month program. Now, maybe you're further down you've been doing this for years and it's only a 9-month program for you. But make small steps and show improvements each month or each quarter, whatever your reporting cycle is, and you will get there. And collect that evidence, if only so that when the regulator comes calling, you can point to it and say, hey, this is how we work. Like I said, nothing will please the regulator more than you being able to produce the evidence. Okay, I think there's 2 more in. Mary, new to financial services sector, and one of my key deliverables is to draft an operational resilience framework. Any advices or first steps? Yeah, I did at the end of a workshop, Mary, somebody asked that question. We're doing I've mentioned it before, 4 workshops on operational resilience. Now, they're each 2 hours. They go into more detail than I've gone in any of these. And somebody asked on the 3rd of the workshops to address that, and I put in a slide in the 4th one. And it was exactly that. Now, if you email me separately, Mary, and you'll see my email address there, I'll send you that slide. But I think the question was, where do you start? And I think the starting point is list out your services, all of your services that you as an organization provide, and then mark those that are critical or important, that satisfy your definition of critical or important. And if you don't have a definition yet, I'd still start by listing out all the services and then getting the senior management team to agree on what is the definition of a critical or important service. And then when you got the critical or important services, then do the business impact analysis on each of those, understand the dependencies. And I have that slide, and if anybody wants it, it's just a 1 slide. And I understood the question, because sometimes if you're given the responsibility, all you need really is, well, where do I start? Because when you start, then things begin to fall into place. So happy to share that with you, Mary. Okay, I'm tempted to give you back 5 minutes of your day, and thank you for your attendance. If questions occur to you afterwards, I'm always interested and to be challenged or to receive interesting questions, and always interested to help. So thank you for your attendance today. I hope you got something out of it. And if you're interested, in 8 days' time, we'll do a demo of our solution. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.